And here's one which some people think was my own story, David Copperfield. Oh, Lord, can I really say I was an orphan? But you can be born and thrust into the world and feel that you are one. Shortly after his father's death, Clara Copperfield remarried Mr. Murdstone, who entered life one day with his sister Jane. And she said she didn't like boys.
So good as to give me your keys, my dear. I'll attend to all this sort of thing in future.
From that time, Miss Murdstone kept the keys in her own little jail all day, and under her pillow all night, and my mother had no more to do with them than I had. My mother did not suffer her authority to pass from her without a shadow of protest. One night when Miss Murdstone had been developing certain household plans to her brother, my mother suddenly began to cry and said she thought she might have been consulted.
Clara, I wonder at you.
It's very well to say you wonder, Edward, and it's very well to say you talk about firmness, but you wouldn't like it yourself.
Firmness, I may observe, was the grand quality on which both Mr. and Miss Murdstone took their stand. Mr. Murdstone was firm. Nobody in his world was to be so firm as Mr. Murdstone. Nobody else in his world was to be firm at all, for everybody was to be bent to his firmness. Miss Murdstone was an exception. She might be firm, but only by relationship, and in an inferior and tributary degree. My mother was another exception. She might be firm, and must be, but only in bearing their firmness, and firmly believing there was no other firmness upon earth.
Very hard. It's my own house.
My own house, Clara?
Our own house. I hope you must know what I mean, Edward. It's very hard in your own house, but I may not have a say about domestic matters. Sure, I managed very well before we were married. There's evidence. Ask Peggotty. Ask Peggotty if I didn't do very well when I wasn't interfered with.
Edward, let there be an end to this. I go back tomorrow.
Jane Murdstone, be silent. How dare you insinuate that you don't know my character better than your words imply?
I'm sure I don't want anybody to go. I should be very miserable and unhappy if anybody was to go. I don't ask much. I'm not unreasonable. I only want to be consulted. Sometimes. I am very much obliged to anybody who assists me, and I only want to be consulted as a mere form. Sometimes. I thought you were pleased with me being inexperienced and girlish. Edward, I'm sure you said so, but you seem to hate me for it now. It was so severe.
Edward, let there be an end to this. I go tomorrow.
Jane Murdstone, will you be silent? How dare you?
Miss Murdstone made a jail delivery of her pocket handkerchief and held it before her eyes.
Clara, you surprise me. You astound me. Yes, I had the satisfaction in the thought of marrying an inexperienced and artless person, and forming her character, and infusing into it some amount of that firmness and decision of which it stood in need. But when Jane Murdstone is kind enough to come to my assistance in this endeavour, and to assume for my sake a condition something like a housekeeper's, and when she meets with a base return...
Pray, Edward, don't accuse
say, with a base return, that feeling of mine is chilled and altered.
Don't, my love, say that. Oh, don't, Edward. I can't bear to hear it. Whatever I am affectionate. I know I am affectionate. I can say it, I'm not sure that I am. Ask Peggotty. I'm sure she'll say that I'm affectionate.
There is no extent of mere weakness, Clara, that can have the least weight with me. You lose breath.
Pray, let us be friends. I couldn't live under coldness or unkindness. I am so sorry. I have a great many defects, I know. It's very good of you, Edward, with your strength of mind, to endeavour to correct them for me. Jane, I don't object to anything. I should be quite broken-hearted if you thought of leaving.
Jane Murdstone, any harsh words between us are, I hope, uncommon. It is not my fault that so unusual an occurrence has taken place tonight. I was betrayed into it by another. Nor is it your fault. You were betrayed into it by another. Let us both try to forget it. And as this is not a fit scene for the boy, David, go to bed.
I could hardly find the door. Through the mass of tears that stood in my eyes. I was so sorry for my mother's distress, but I groped my way out and groped my way up to my room in the dark without even having the heart to say good night to Peggotty or to get a candle from her. One morning, when I went into the parlour with my books, I found my mother looking anxious, Miss Murdstone looking firm, and Mr. Murdstone binding something around the bottom of a cane, a lithe and limber cane, which he left off binding when I came in, and poised and switched again.
I tell you, Clara, I have been often flogged myself.
To be sure, of course, said Miss Murdstone.
Of course, that's true.
Certainly, my dear Jane. But do you think it did Edward any good?
Do you think it did Edward harm, Clara?
That is the point.
To this my mother returned.
Certainly, my dear Jane.
She said no more. I felt apprehensive that I was personally interested in this dialogue and sought Mr. Murdstone's eye as it lighted on mine.
Now, David, you must be far more careful today than usual.
He gave the cane another poise and another switch, and having finished his preparation of it, laid it down beside him with an impressive look and took up his book. We began badly and went on worse. I'd come in with an idea of distinguishing myself, rather, conceiving that I was very well prepared, but it turned out to be quite a mistake. Book after book was added to the heap of failures, Miss Murdstone being firmly watchful of us all this time, and when we came at last to the 5,000 cheeses, canes on that occasion, I remember, my mother burst out crying. "Oh, Clara," shouted Miss Murdstone.
I am not quite well, my dear Jane, I think.
I saw him wink solemnly at his sister as he rose and said, taking up the cane,
Why, Jane, we can hardly expect Clara to bear with perfect firmness the worry and torment that David has occasioned her today. That would be stoical. Clara is greatly strengthened and improved, but we can hardly expect so much from her. David, you and I will go upstairs, boy.
as he took me out at the door, my mother ran towards us. Miss Murdstone said,
Stop, Clara! How you are a perfect fool!
and interfered, and I saw my mother stop her ears then, and I heard her crying. He walked me up to my room. Slowly and gravely, I certainly had a delight in that formal parade of executing justice, and when we got there, suddenly twisted my head under his arm. Mr. Murdstone, sir! I cried to him, pray don't beat me, I've tried to learn, sir, I can't learn while you're Miss Murdstone, but I can't indeed.
Can't you indeed, David? We'll try that.
He had my head in his, like a vice, but I twined round him somehow and stopped him for a moment, entreating him not to beat me. It was only a moment that I stopped him, for he cut me heavily an instant afterwards, and in the same instant I caught the hand with which he held me in my mouth, between my teeth, and bit it through.